What's up, guys? Today we are saying goodbye to Phantom Revenge and hello to Enneacraft. It is the last archetype that we have to cover for this set. We've already done Cool Tune, we've already done Hecka Hands. If you haven't seen those videos already, go check them out. But with all that said, let's flip right over to Enneacraft. And here we are again in Omega. I just want to start by saying this deck is kind of complicated, so I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible while still letting you know everything you need to about the deck. We're going to start with the field spell because it provides a lot of structure for the archetype. It's always treated as an Enneacraft card. It has a trigger effect during the end phase to remove all of the counters on your Enneacraft cards in your pendulum scale and deal 900 damage to your opponent for each counter you removed. So we already know we're working with counters in this strategy. Once per turn during your main phase, you can target any number of face-up Enneacraft cards you control and return them to the hand. And it also has a trigger effect that if one of your Enneacraft monsters is flipped face up, you can either return it to the hand or put it into the pendulum zone. And so the field spell is going to reward us for amassing counters, flipping monsters face up, and retaining cards on the board. But how does the deck play proactively? If you made it this far, consider leaving a like and subscribe so you can support the channel and stay up to date with my daily uploads. Thanks so much for watching. So in Engine, we have 8 different monster cards, and they all have different effects. Every single one of the pendulum monsters has a shared effect in the pendulum scale to gain a counter every time a monster is flipped face up on the field. And every single one of the monsters has an effect in the hand to reveal itself and then special summon a monster from your hand in face down defense position, and both lock yourself retroactively and proactively to only special summoning face down for the turn. The first cluster I'm going to talk about is all of the level 1 monsters, and I'm going to refer to these by color. So Alazonia, I'm going to call yellow, Tromeria, I'm going to call blue, Oakneria, I'm going to call green, and Orgia, I'm going to call red. And they all have the same effect in Pendulum Scale as a hard once per turn. You pay 900 life points and reveal 3 Enneacraft cards from your deck. And the cards you reveal don't even have to have different names. Your opponent randomly chooses one of them and adds it to your hand, and then you shuffle the rest back. All of the monsters in the archetype also have a semi-shared effect when they're face down on the field to flip face up and do something, and the level 1s all chain to a card or effect activated by your opponent to flip themselves face up and search for an Enneacraft card. Yellow is going to chain to a card or effect that adds a card from deck to the hand. Blue is going to chain to a card or effect that includes a special summon of a monster. Green is going to chain to a card or effect that activates in the graveyard or banished pile, and red is going to activate in response to a monster effect in the hand. Once they flip themselves face up, they all do different things. Yellow is going to banish a random card from your opponent's hand until the end phase. Blue is going to negate the effects of an effect monster your opponent controls. Green is going to shuffle back up to 3 cards from your opponent's graveyard or banished pile into the deck, and red is going to destroy a monster your opponent controls. And so when you're playing the deck proactively, you're going to use the pendulum scale effects of the level 1s to search for more copies of themselves or the higher level monsters, and then you're going to use your field spell to return them to the hand, put them face down on the field in the monster zone, and plus off them again during your opponent's turn, all while presenting a little bit of interaction off of their flip effects. And now that we've talked about the little guys, let's talk about the level 9s. These don't go plus in Pendulum Scale, but they do have a shared effect. They gain counters just like the level 1s, but at the end of each battle phase, they check to see if you have another Enneacraft monster in your other Pendulum Scale, and if you do, they destroy a monster on the field with less attack than them, and they're all 3Ks. And also, just like the level 1s, they share the effect to reveal themselves and special summon a monster from your hand face down and lock you. But unlike the level 1s, their purpose once they're face down on the field is to present powerful interaction and sometimes even advance your win condition. We'll start with the Lion, who flips himself face up when your opponent chains a card to your activated card or effect. When he resolves, he flips himself face up and bounces 3 cards on the field to the hand without targeting. And once he's been flipped face up on the field, every time your opponent adds a card to their hand, they take 900 damage. Up next, we have the Scorpion, who flips himself face up in response to your opponent's card or effect that includes destroying a card on the field, and subsequently protects Enneacraft cards you control and monsters you control from being destroyed by card effects until the end of the turn. Additionally, once he's been flipped face up, each time your opponent sends monsters to the graveyard, they take 900 damage. We also have the Dragon, who flips himself face up in response to a card or effect that targets a card you control to negate that effect, and then hand rip 1 card from your opponent's hand to their banished pile face down. And once this card has been flipped face up, your opponent can't target cards on the field or in the graveyard with card effects. And last but not least, we have the Whale, whose flipped face up condition only triggers on your own turn when your opponent activates a card or effect on the field, but it's an Omni negate, and And once it's been flipped face up, it flips everything except itself back to face down defense position and prevents them from changing their battle position. And with the monsters out of the way, let's just jump right into the spell cards. They provide a similar function in the deck, so I'll talk about them at the same time. The first one is called Enneacraft Release, and it places a pendulum monster from your deck into your pendulum scale. And then on a separate turn, you can banish it from your graveyard to add an Enneacraft monster back from your extra deck face up to your hand. These all have a pendulum scale of 0 and lock you into summoning face down, so you're not going to pendulum summon them, so this graveyard effect is a nice way to loop resources when you're trying to stall. We also have Enneacraft Rebirth, which is kind of like an in-archetype reload. You get to shuffle any number of Enneacraft monster cards from your hand or face-up field into the deck or extra deck, then draw cards equal to the number of cards shuffled in this way. And then if your opponent summons a monster while it's in your graveyard, you can banish it from the graveyard to apply one of the following effects. You can either special summon one Enneacraft monster from your hand in face down defense position, or you can flip up a face down defense position Enneacraft monster you control. And so the spell cards are going to provide us with an extra layer of consistency and interaction by placing a level 1 in our pendulum scale, or letting us flip up a monster outside of its normal conditions during our opponent's turn. Most of our typical lines are going to involve using the level 1s to fix for the interaction pieces that we don't have in our opening hand, find our way to the field spell, and fill our pendulum zones with Enneacraft monsters so that we can start amassing counters to advance our win condition of burning our opponent out with our field spell. But what other tech can we play to bolster this game plan? An obvious tech card for this deck is going to be Dominus Purge, because all of the Enneacraft monsters are either light or earth, meaning you don't lock yourself out of anything in the engine by activating this card from the hand. We also definitely want to play some quantity of Daruma Cannon, because this is going to let you flip all of your Enneacraft monsters back to face down defense position once you've resolved their effects on your opponent's turn, and re-trigger them since they're not hard once per turn. We can also play Book of Eclipse for the same function, flipping our monsters face down again on our opponent's turn, but this as a quick play spell can also be used going second to try to play into established boards. We have Soul and Luna as a tech option to flip up a monster outside of its trigger conditions to interrupt our opponent's line by flipping their materials face down. And right now the deck doesn't have any extra deck monsters, so we are free to play any number of Pot of Extravagance that we'd like so that we can increase the quantity of cards in our opening hand. And if we're not playing extra deck pieces that matter for proactive play, we might as well play something like Dogmatica Punishment so that we can 2-for-1 our opponent in the right situations. Some of the targets I'd recommend for punishment include Natis for an extra pop, Malong for a bounce, Aggregator for a negate, Adagnister for a delayed spin back, Skull Knight for a pop, and Skullwagon for a spell trap pop. And if you want a little bit of flexibility, you could even play the Fallen and the Virtuous, because this gives you more control over when you destroy a card on the field by including copies of Albion to recycle it and use it again and again and again. The only conflict with some of these is with Dominus Purge. We won't be able to activate Aggregator if we've used Purge from the hand. We won't be able to activate Albion if we've used Purge from the hand. But Purge doesn't conflict with Fallen and the Virtuous, it just conflicts with cycling it. I also just wanted to take a moment to talk about possible side deck options. Because Enneacraft is such a unique deck, it's going to side a little bit differently than the stuff that we've seen before. I actually would recommend just playing however many Solemns you want in the side when you know you're going first. This deck does present a lot of interaction going first, but not in the same way that a traditional deck like Traptrix or Labyrinth would, where you're already filling your spell trap zones with in-engine interaction. You're filling your monster zones with face down interaction, so you can play as many going first traps as you want. And then also, this deck isn't trying to kill during the battle phase on the crackback like many of the other decks in the metagame are. And there are a lot of decks in the format that are notably weak to evenly matched, especially Dracotail, so this might be like one of the only great decks to side evenly in. And with all that said, there's just one more thing I want to talk about before I jump to the conclusion, and this is pointing to future support. The effect of Enneacraft Rebirth specifies to return cards from the field to the deck or extra deck, and there are no cards that would conventionally go to the extra deck in the Enneacraft archetype right now, so that makes me feel like they're going to release extra deck monsters. The only situation that would create is it would conflict with the in-hand summoning conditions of the main deck monsters, so maybe these would be things that you would summon after going first, then playing your interaction into your opponent, and then once things are flipped face up and you're not locked, you can make the Xyz monsters instead of resummoning from the hand. But I could see us getting a rank 1, I could see us getting a rank 9, that would be pretty interesting, right? And then perhaps they could also just give us a fusion or even a contact fusion, because summoning that would put the materials into the extra deck face up to get back with release. And thinking about it, if they really wanted to, they could just print a contact fusion that summons itself face down so it doesn't conflict with the lock. And lastly, it would also be pretty cool to see an in-archetype trap card just to fill the back row with something you can search for and interact on your opponent's turn, just to provide one more layer. And that is Enneacraft. It is a super consistent stun deck that is going to find a way to play really proactively going first. I do fear that the deck is going to struggle going second, and will struggle into Droll and Lockbird, and will struggle into Mulcharmy Perulia because all of these effects summon from the hand. But if it dodges those cards and wins enough die rolls, I could see this deck topping a regional or even a YCS with the right ban list. But let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you next time.